Thank you, Seth, for that very generous introduction. The state of the Jewish people. Where do you begin? As 2022 comes to a close, there are many vectors to consider, from the continuing spike in global anti-Semitism, new and pernicious ways to delegitimize Israel at the United Nations, to the seemingly untrammeled attacks on Israel and Zionism from the progressive left and on university campuses, to far-right acts of violence and raw hatred spewed on extremist internet websites, a spate of physical attacks on Jews in, of all places, New York City, Holocaust denial and minimalization, and the constant daily existential threats to Israel posed by a hegemonistic Iran. What's most troubling of all is the sense that anti-Semitism has become mainstream. It's not only the number of incidents. Hate crimes against Jews in the United States far outnumber those committed against others. It's also the now daily incidents and occurrences that meld into a normality that is both discomforting and dangerous. One day, it's an arrest of individuals who have threatened to attack a synagogue. The next day, it's a celebrity athlete who offhandedly blames Jews for controlling the media or racism. Another day, it's vile graffiti in suburbs with significant Jewish populations. It isn't that these incidents happen without comment from political leaders or university presidents, religious leaders, or the media. But it is getting to the point now where this response seems many times a collective shrug. There it is again. It's terrible. We must combat it, etc. But how? I sometimes feel that there is a general feeling that the Jewish community can deal with this phenomenon by itself. After all, we may be small in numbers, but we are well organized, articulate, and not afraid to speak out. Well, that may well be true, especially in the United States, where the pluralization of our community has given rise to many voices which tweet or post to Facebook, Instagram, and other platforms. They speak out on TV, they write op-eds, and convene conferences to address the threats at hand. That said, you can never have enough friends or allies. I learned this growing up in semi-rural New Hampshire, where our community's 25 Jewish families were dwarfed by a total county population of 50,000. We encountered some classic anti-Semitism, but we had many friends who were understanding of and respectful to us. Extrapolate that out to the challenges facing us today. New elements of concern, not existent in decades past, have seeped to the surface to compound the threats and rhetoric tossed about on the internet and beyond. The campaign against Israel's very existence, whether it be the BDS movement, the establishment of a permanent commission within the United Nations Human Rights Council, whose only mission is to spray apartheid charges against the Jewish state, the canceling of pro-Israel students and friendly professors on campuses nationwide, or members of Congress who make no bones about their desire to deny Israel the means to defend itself. That's not legitimate criticism. The legitimate criticism argument is both presumptuous and disingenuous. Let us be clear. When you seek to deny the Jewish people their right to their ancient homeland, no matter what amount of doublespeak, clothed in freedom of speech rhetoric, can conceal the anti-Semitism therein. The anti-Semitism we face here at home exists in other variations in Europe and in Latin America. It's the same perfect storm from the left, the right, and from Islamists across continents. In Europe, in particular, far-right parties and populism give approbation to Jew hatred. Latin America, governments of the left, including those with ties to Iran, are at the forefront of Israel bashing, presenting threats to vulnerably small communities there. What's missing in the fight against anti-Semitism here and abroad is a clear sense of urgency. Mainstreaming can produce a certain complacency that doesn't serve to stem the flow of bile and violence that is served up at us every day. This should never become the new normal. Cliched as it may sound, we need to redouble our efforts on multiple fronts to prevent this from happening, from pushing more states to adopt Holocaust educational curricula, to encouraging counties and local jurisdictions to establish law enforcement hate crime units, to creating a new position in the U.S. Department of Justice to monitor and combat domestic anti-Semitism. In Europe, Latin America, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, similar initiatives are underway, but everywhere, much more can be done. B'nai B'rith, through its None Shall Be Afraid program and so many other programs, statements, podcasts, and the work of our volunteers and staff worldwide, pledges to be a leader on the front line in the ongoing battle against the haters who flourish on the internet and elsewhere in the dark and in the not so dark corners of the international community. One final word. It is disheartening that some in our community have a distorted view of what constitutes anti-Semitism. The International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, known as IHRA, a consortium of countries that subscribe to a mission of furthering Holocaust education and remembrance, has devised a widely accepted definition of anti-Semitism that recognizes the threats posed by those who cross the line into demonizing Israel and its supporters. This definition, drafted primarily by those who are not Jewish, is becoming widely accepted, except by those who want a permanent green light to degrade and delegitimize Israel. They must not be allowed to succeed. The threats posed by Iran do not end with its quest for a nuclear weapon. It has become the principal contributor to chaos in the Middle East through its support and direction of a series of proxies in Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Gaza, and Yemen. Its ties to Venezuela and others in the Western Hemisphere give it a foothold right here in America's backyard. Indeed, Lebanon is considered by some to be a wholly owned subsidiary of Iran, Inc. Its supply of precision-guided rockets and other armaments to Hezbollah and that group's hold on the Lebanese parliament and other arms of government has largely emasculated that country, already considered an economic basket case. Iran has close ties to Hamas. Its proxy in Yemen, the Houthis, attack Western-leaning states in the Gulf region. Its Iraqi proxies have fired at American troops in the region as well. Iran seeks to establish and build a blue water navy, and in recent months, it has entered into close ties with Russia, providing it with the deadly Shahed 136 attack drones. Iran is one of the largest human rights abusers in the world as well, even before the killing of Mahsa Amini, which set off massive demonstrations in Iran's cities, still going on, by women, oil field workers, shopkeepers, and others. The regime in Tehran had established a 4 decades old record of executing juvenile offenders and members of the LGBTQ community and persecuting political dissidents as well as adherents of the Baha'i religion. As we meet, hundreds of protesters have been killed and many thousands jailed for their participation in these street protests in Iran. Iran is dead set to build nuclear weapons. The attempt in 2015 to curb Iran's nuclear program with the JCPOA, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, and the most recent effort to reconstitute the agreement after the United States left in 2018 have been left in tatters by an Iranian regime that has done everything it can to build its nuclear program and to engage in malign behavior in the region. Iran poses an existential threat to the state of Israel. It calls for Israel's destruction on a daily basis, using Nazi-like language when its leaders and spokespersons refer to the Jewish state as a, quote, cancer that must be excised. Iran poses a threat to Western democracies, and especially the state of Israel. When Hitler and his Third Reich minions said exactly what they intended to do to achieve Lebensraum and the elimination of the Jewish people before a shot was even fired in World War II, what constituted the free world in those days had more than its share of doubters and skeptics. We cannot allow that to happen twice in a century. We must take the threats emanating from Tehran seriously and not just as throwaway rhetoric for home consumption. Ending the quest for a new JCPOA should just be the first step in addressing the very real threats posed to all of us. The wake-up bell has been rung. Is the Western Alliance ready and willing to act? B'nai B'rith was present in San Francisco in 1945 for the founding of the United Nations. The world body came into being on the ashes of World War II and the Holocaust. Fascism and the Axis powers had been defeated, and the business before the international community was to create an organization that would work to prevent war and improve the global human condition. When we were officially accredited at the UN in 1947, the imperative to advocate for and advance human rights in conjunction with the mission of the new organization led us eventually to open a full-time office on United Nations affairs in 1960. Its founding director was my late colleague, William Corey, one of the great champions of free immigration for Soviet Jewry and other causes, and who, at the time of his passing, was working on a book about Raphael Lemkin, the great human rights advocate who coined the word genocide in 1942. Israel was admitted to the world body in 1949, and it has not enjoyed a normal day at UN headquarters in New York or any of its agencies since then. It has been subject to biased resolutions, one-sided special rapporteurs, and most recently, a commission of inquiry set up within the Human Rights Council solely to advance an open-ended Star Chamber proceeding against the Jewish state. The chair of the commission frequently uses the term apartheid to describe the nature of the state of Israel. The currents of bias against Israel find their basis in bloc voting, ideology, and in support of a Palestinian narrative which rejects negotiations with Israel in favor of refusing to recognize Israel as a Jewish state, and advancing a zero-sum platform of demanding that millions of Palestinian refugees flood it in order to change its demographics, which would result in a one-state solution, that is, a Palestinian majority state. When it comes to Israel and the UN, it's as if the organization is stuck in a 1980 time warp. The world has changed since then, no place more so than in the Middle East. The Abraham Accords have brought a normalization of relations between Israel and the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, and Morocco, with surely other Arab and Muslim majority countries to follow. These Arab countries have over the years been supporters of the Palestinians, particularly within the Arab League, but they feel they can no longer be held back by a rejectionist, nihilistic Palestinian leadership. Security and economic issues have moved this ice-breaking process forward. The Palestinian issue remains in a cul-de-sac, except at the UN. B'nai B'rith, through its Office of UN Affairs, its representation at the Human Rights Council in Geneva and in Paris at UNESCO, as well as through the work of the newest member of the B'nai B'rith family, IHRA, BBI, IHRA is the American Jewish International Relations Institute, works tirelessly to counter and turn back this tide of double standards at the UN. Here's one example. We organized and hosted a conference in Paris on the Hebrew language recently in conjunction with UNESCO's initiative on indigenous languages. Hebrew is a most significant birthright to our ancient homeland, and the conference experts who presented at the Paris meeting made that abundantly clear. We'll continue to dedicate ourselves to bringing about change, fair treatment for Israel at the UN. We owe a vote of thanks to those in B'nai B'rith who had the foresight to bring us into the UN for what the organization was then and for the battles that have ensued since then on behalf of Israel. Well, the passage of time is inevitable, but it can also be a bitter enemy. 2023 will mark 78 years after World War II and the Holocaust. The number of survivors has fallen victim to the biological clock, with the passing now of so many due to a combination of age, infirmities, and illness. The time is coming when there will be no one left to show their concentration camp tattoos or to say, I was there, I saw it, I experienced the barbarity. As an organization, B'nai B'rith was a special target of the Nazi regime and its collaborators. In 1933, in Germany alone, there were over 100 B'nai B'rith lodges and over 15,000 members. In Poland, Czechoslovakia, Italy, Belgium, Holland, Yugoslavia, and so many other countries in Europe, our activities came to an abrupt and tragic end. With that as a backdrop, B'nai B'rith has been at the forefront of seeking restitution and compensation to survivors and their families and to Jewish communities largely depopulated, but seeking to reestablish themselves and to thrive once again. In that regard, we were founding members of both the Claims Conference and the World Jewish Restitution Organization. I personally, on behalf of WJRO, lead restitution negotiations with 2 countries in former Eastern Europe. At the UN, Latin America, and so many other places, we initiate and sponsor programs of remembrance which pay tribute to the 6 million as well as to those who survived. As those who minimize or deny that the Holocaust happened seem to be gaining traction on the internet and elsewhere, and with the passing not only of survivors, but those of the greatest generation which fought the Nazis, it is our solemn obligation to see to it that this story of the greatest murder in history, this attempt to extinguish our people, not fall by the wayside of time. And that means not only conveying the history and the lessons to be derived from it. In the non-Jewish world, right here in our own community, to generations now so far removed from the barbaric events and tragic outcome of the Holocaust years. Depending on whose numbers you accept, there are probably 16 million Jews in the world today. Some set the figure somewhat higher, but in a world of about 8 billion people, we are certainly a minority of minorities. The issues of assimilation, smaller families, an aging community, Jewish education and continuity, and the future of smaller Jewish communities in Europe and Latin America are constant causes of concern that much larger minorities and ethnic groups are better able to endure. The issue of having adequate resources to meet these challenges is always a question. Equally important is the will to carry out the fight on these issues. Multitasking would be the watchword here, and the pressures on Jewish communities around the world to get the job done are indeed immense. Having run through all of our challenges, it's incumbent to look at some of the bright spots as well. Jewish studies programs at universities around the world continue to thrive. Innovative ways to serve our seniors have emerged, and B'nai B'rith's highly successful seniors housing program is a good example of that. More countries are naming special envoys on Holocaust issues. More and more films and documentaries on the Holocaust are being produced, and they're not only in theaters, but are being streamed on platforms that didn't exist just a few years ago. New Jewish organizations have cropped up, including a number devoted to fighting anti-Semitism. Israeli TV stations are being carried by cable systems around the world, and we can get our Jewish news now on any one of a number of Jewish-themed websites. So this is not a case of, if things are so good, why are they so bad? This is about being conversant with the bad, the challenges of anti-Semitism and anti-Israel behavior globally, and being able and ready to confront them and roll them back. It's also about building and advancing the good, doing our utmost to ensure the continuity of our people through initiatives and programs that speak to 21st century technologies, aided by good old-fashioned communal elbow grease. For nearly 180 years, B'nai B'rith has had its institutional ear to the ground in the Jewish community, alert to both its needs and its challenges, and to the threats posed to it in every generation. Our mission statement, which has remained the same over all these decades, speaks to our commitment to our people. It says, in part, and I quote, "In advancing human rights, Israel advocacy, ensuring stability for older adults, diversity education, improving communities, and helping communities in crisis." We're proud to have had a terrific track record over 3 separate centuries. But it's what we do tomorrow that sustains that record of service. When we meet a year from now, we'll take stock again of the state of the Jewish world. In the meantime, we know that the challenges will be daunting. As always, we'll be up to the task.